Obasi, a woman lover, lived in a small village. He was rich, very rich. His wealth was known far and wide. But more than his riches, what Obasi loved the most was women. He had a heart for them, and every woman knew it. Whenever Obasi saw a woman he gave her money, gifts, anything she wanted. And because he was so rich, women came to him easily. They smiled, they followed, and Obasi welcomed them. Obasi married a beautiful woman named Nolika. Nolika loved Obasi, but she wasn't like the other women. Nolika was strong. She was stubborn. In the whole village, no one dared to cross Nolika. Her eyes were like fire when she was angry, and her words were sharp like a blade. But Obasi didn't care. He loved his beautiful wife. They had children together, and Nolika took care of the home. Even though Obasi loved other women, Nolika stood by him, watching, waiting. Everyone in the village knew Nolika was not a woman to be played with. And so Obasi's life was full of riches and women. But little did he know, trouble was coming. Nolika loved Obasi deeply, but her love came with fire. She didn't like how Obasi's eyes wandered to other women. It made her heart burn with anger. Whenever Nolika saw Obasi talking to another woman, her face would twist with rage. She didn't care who it was. She would fight them, scream at them, and send them running. Even though Nolika had children with Obasi, her heart stayed restless. She loved him, but his love for women made her feel like the ground was shaking beneath her feet. Obasi's eyes were always looking for the next woman, and it made Nolika furious. One day, Obasi came home with news that turned Nolika's world upside down. He had married another wife. Her name was Sefa, and she was beautiful. So beautiful that Obasi couldn't resist her. Sefa had smooth skin, a quiet smile, and eyes that seemed to shine like the moon. But to Nolika, Sefa was like a thorn. From that moment, trouble started in Obasi's home. Nolika's heart was full of jealousy, and Sefa became her target. The house that was once full of peace began to tremble with fights and anger. And the storm that led to Obasi losing his manhood was just beginning. Sefa was gentle, with a soft voice and a quiet way of moving. She never wanted trouble. But Nolika didn't care. From the day Sefa entered their home, Nolika's anger grew like wildfire. She couldn't stand the sight of Sefa, and she made sure Sefa felt her wrath every day. "Go and sweep the house," Nolika would command, pointing with sharp eyes. Sefa would quietly obey, sweeping every corner, while Nolika's children sat and laughed at her. "Fetch water!" Nolika's voice would ring out again and again. Sefa, with no other choice, would pick up the water pot and walk to the stream, her feet dragging with exhaustion. While she worked, Nolika's children played, laughing at how much their stepmother had to do. Sefa couldn't take it anymore. She went to Obasi, hoping he would help her. But Obasi didn't care. His mind was always on the next woman he could marry. He barely listened to Sefa's complaints. "I'll talk to her," Obasi would say, but his words were empty. He never did anything, and so Sefa had to endure. Every day, Nolika made her life harder and harder, and there was no escape. She worked, she suffered, and there was no one to save her. Obasi's eyes never rested. Even with Nolika and Sefa in his home, his love for women grew stronger. One day, while visiting the town, Obasi met another woman. Her name was Lamara, and she was different from the village women. She was young, with smooth skin, bright eyes, and a smile that could stop anyone in their tracks. Obasi couldn't resist. He married her without thinking twice. But Lamara wasn't like the other wives. She didn't marry Obasi out of love. She only saw his riches. And in her heart she thought, This old man won't last long. When he dies, I'll take everything and leave this village forever. When Lamara moved into the house, the piece that was already broken shattered into pieces. Nolika, who once ruled the house with her stubbornness, felt threatened. Sefa, who already suffered in silence, now had to deal with Lamara's boldness. Lamara was not like Sefa, who quietly did as Nolika commanded. No, Lamara was bold, and she refused to be pushed around. She didn't care about Nolika or Sefa. She wasn't afraid of Nolika's fiery temper or her bullying. She refused to do any chores, and she made sure everyone knew she was in charge. Even Nolika's children had to listen to her. "Go fetch water for me," Lamara would say, and the children had no choice but to obey. Even Nolika's sharp words couldn't stop Lamara from doing as she pleased. Obasi, as usual, didn't care. He was blinded by Lamara's beauty, giving her whatever she wanted. Nolika and Sefa's complaints fell on deaf ears, and with Lamara's arrival, the house became a boiling pot of anger, jealousy, and trouble. The storm that began with Sefa was now a raging fire, and there was no stopping it. When Nolika or Sefa tried to complain, Obasi would wave them off. He didn't want to hear it. He was too busy enjoying Lamara's company to care about what the others had to say. "Obasi, can't you see how she treats us?" Nolika would shout, but Obasi wouldn't even look up. Sefa, who had long endured Nolika's cruelty, realized something important. The only way to handle Lamara was to team up with Nolika. Though Nolika had always been her tormentor, they both shared the same goal now. They needed to get rid of Lamara. And so Nolika and Sefa, once enemies, came together. They whispered and planned, knowing that if they didn't act soon, Lamara would continue to control the house. Their plan was simple. If they couldn't defeat Lamara alone, they would do it together. The two women became allies in their fight against the one woman who had disrupted their world. Nolika and Sefa knew Obasi too well. His eyes always wandered toward the young and beautiful, and that gave them an idea. If they could find a woman more beautiful than Lamara, Obasi's attention would shift. He would forget about Lamara, and she would lose her place as the favorite wife. "We need someone he can't resist," Nolika whispered to Sefa one night. Sefa nodded, agreeing that this was their only way. After days of thinking, Sefa remembered a woman she had seen in the village. Her name was Zina, and she was just the type Obasi liked. Tall, with skin as smooth and shiny as polished clay, and legs that seemed to go on forever. Her sweet smile and gentle eyes made heads turn wherever she went. "She's perfect," Sefa said with a sly grin. Nolika's eyes lit up. They knew if Obasi saw Zina, his heart would leap, and he would quickly make her his wife. Their plan was set. They would introduce Zina to Obasi, and just like that, Lamara would be pushed aside. The power would shift once again. Together, they approached Zina with their plan. They offered her gifts and promises, telling her that Obasi would spoil her with riches if she became his wife. Zina, eager for wealth, agreed without hesitation. And so the trap was laid. Zina began spending time near the popular palm wine cellar, knowing Obasi would soon notice her. Nolika and Sefa waited, watching closely, certain that their plan would work, and that Lamara's reign in the household would soon come to an end. Just as Nolika and Sefa had planned, Obasi's eyes fell on Zina one evening as she sat by the palm wine store. Her tall figure, glowing skin, and sweet smile caught his attention immediately. Obasi's heart skipped a beat. Without wasting time, he approached her, and within days, he made up his mind. Zina would be his next wife. Obasi married Zina, and soon she was brought into the house as the fourth wife. Nolika and Sefa watched with satisfaction, their plan unfolding just as they had hoped. They knew Obasi's heart would now be distracted from Lamara, and the power she once had would slip away. But when Lamara heard the news, she was furious. Her face burned with anger. She couldn't believe that Obasi had married yet another woman. She rushed to him, her voice trembling as she begged, "Obasi, please, you don't need another wife. I am enough for you." Obasi looked at her calmly and said, "Lamara, that's how I married you too. Nolika and Sefa were here before you came. You'll get used to it, just like they did." Lamara felt like a stone had been dropped into her chest. She couldn't believe how easily Obasi dismissed her feelings. He didn't care. The same way he had married her while Nolika and Sefa were already in the house. Now Zina had joined them too. Lamara had no choice but to accept it, but her anger boiled inside her. Meanwhile, Nolika and Sefa were celebrating silently, knowing that the balance of power had shifted once again. Zina was in the house, and now it was Lamara's turn to feel the sting of being pushed aside. Lamara's heart filled with frustration. As each day passed, she watched Nolika and Zina grow closer, whispering and laughing together, leaving her out. She felt like an outsider in her own home. Whenever they sat together in the evenings, sharing stories and jokes, Lamara would sit alone, anger swelling inside her. She couldn't take it anymore. She decided to visit her mother, hoping for some comfort or advice. Her mother listened quietly as Lamara poured out her frustration, telling her how Obasi was now showering all his attention and gift on Zina. "Mother, I can't stand it. He hardly looks at me anymore," Lamara cried. But her mother was calm. She stroked Lamara's hand and said, "Patience, my daughter. Remember why you married Obasi in the first place. He's old. Soon enough he'll be gone, and all his wealth will be yours." Lamara nodded, trying to calm herself. Her mother's words made sense. She had married Obasi for his riches, not for love. All she had to do was wait, but waiting wasn't easy. Every day, Obasi gave more attention to Zina. Gifts of gold earrings, necklaces, new clothes. Lamara's frustration only grew deeper. The sight of Zina glowing with Obasi's love made Lamara's blood boil. She had been patient for too long, but she knew deep down that a time would come. For now, she would wait. But her anger bubbled under the surface, ready to explode at any moment. One bright morning, it was Zina's turn to cook for the entire household. The sun had barely risen when she started preparing the meal. As the hours passed, the aroma of spices and herbs filled the air, wafting out of the compound and reaching the neighbors. People passing by sniffed the air, wondering if there was a celebration happening. The smell was so rich and delicious that even the birds seemed to stop and enjoy it. Zina had outdone herself. She prepared a soup so flavorful that by the time she finished, the whole house was buzzing with excitement. The wives, children, and even the servants sat eagerly waiting to taste the meal. When it was time to serve, Zina brought out bowls of steaming hot soup with fresh, soft swallow, and everyone gathered around to eat. As they dug in, their praises filled the air. "Zina, this is the best soup I've ever tasted," Nolika exclaimed, licking her fingers. "Yes. What's your secret?" Sefa added, her eyes wide with surprise. Even the children, who were usually picky eaters, ate until their bellies were full. Everyone was happy, chatting and laughing as they ate. The joy of the meal filled the compound like a festival. But as everyone enjoyed the food, Lamara felt uneasy. She had noticed something odd. Obasi, who was usually out chasing women or sitting around, hadn't been seen all morning. It was unlike him to be so quiet, especially on a day when the house was filled with such delicious food. While the others continued eating and praising Zina's cooking, Lamara's mind was racing. Where is Obasi? She thought. Normally, Obasi would have been the first to eat, but he hadn't touched the food, and no one seemed to notice. Her eyes scanned the room, and the uneasy feeling in her stomach grew stronger. Something wasn't right. Lamara pushed her bowl aside and quietly stood up, her heart pounding with worry. She needed to find out where Obasi was. But a strange fear made her steps slow. Why hasn't anyone else noticed? She wondered. And why does everyone seem so calm? With her heart in her throat, Lamara decided it was time to investigate. Something about this feast felt very, very wrong. As the day wore on, Obasi's friends arrived at the house, wondering where he was. They had planned to meet him for a big party, and Obasi, who never missed a gathering, was unusually late. The friends called out from the gate, but there was no sign of him. "Where's Obasi?" one of them asked as the wives came out to greet them. Zina, calm as ever, smiled and said, "He's gone out early this morning. He won't be back for a while." Obasi's friends were puzzled. Obasi would never leave without telling them, especially not on the day of a party. Still, they trusted Zina's words and were about to leave, but Lamara, who had been quietly watching, stepped forward. "No," Lamara said, her voice tense. "Something isn't right. He hasn't been seen all morning. We need to check Zina's room." The other wives and Obasi's friends exchanged confused glances. Zina looked unfazed, her face still as calm as ever. "What? Why would Obasi be in my room?" she asked sweetly. But Lamara didn't back down. Her heart was pounding, and the strange feeling she had all morning was now too strong to ignore. "I don't know," Lamara replied, "but we need to look." Reluctantly, they all followed Lamara to Zina's room. The air felt thick with tension as they opened the door. Inside, the room was quiet, too quiet. Lamara's stomach turned as her eyes swept across the space. Then suddenly, she gasped. There, lying on the floor, was Obasi. His hands and legs were tied tightly with ropes, and his mouth was stuffed with cloth. Blood stained his clothes, and the sight made everyone freeze in horror. But the most shocking part, what was missing, was Obasi's manhood. A scream tore through the room as Lamara backed away, her hand covering her mouth. Nolika and Sefa stood in stone silence, their faces pale. Obasi's friends rushed forward, untying him quickly, but it was too late. Obasi's body was limp, his eyes barely open. The once proud and powerful man was now broken and bleeding. Zina stood in the doorway, her calm smile gone. She didn't say a word as the horror of the scene unfolded in front of her. The terrible discovery shook the house to its core. The man who had once ruled over his wives, chasing women and living in luxury, now lay powerless, his life hanging by a thread. The house that was filled with laughter and joy from the feast had turned into a place of fear and shock. And now, everyone's eyes turned towards Zina. They knew she held the key to this nightmare. News of what had happened spread quickly through the village. It wasn't long before a crowd gathered outside Obasi's house. Zina was held down, her arms tied, her face no longer calm. The air was thick with whispers. Everyone waited for her to speak. They wanted to know why she had done something so terrible. As the silence stretched, Zina finally lifted her head, her voice cold but steady. "Yes, I did it," she said. "I cut off Obasi's manhood." The crowd gasped in horror, but she continued without flinching. "I couldn't take it anymore," Zina said, her eyes blazing with anger. "Obasi couldn't stop. One woman after another. Even after marrying me, he couldn't rest. Just yesterday, I saw him with another woman, holding her close. She was beautiful, young, and I thought, here we go again, another one he's planning to bring into this house." The crowd listened in stunned silence. "I followed them, watching," Zina continued, her voice growing more intense. "He was laughing with her, touching her face, and I knew then he would marry her too. I wasn't going to let that happen, not again. I wanted it to end, for good. If I cut off his manhood, he couldn't marry any more women, no more chasing after anyone." Then she paused, her voice trembled slightly. "But I didn't know," she whispered. "I didn't know the woman he was with was his sister." A murmur spread through the crowd. "Obasi's sister? Not another woman?" Zina's eyes darkened as she continued her confession. "I thought she was just another woman he wanted to marry. I thought I was saving myself from being pushed aside again, just like his other wives before me. So I planned to stop him, once and for all." Then she turned her cold gaze toward Nolika and Sefa. "But I wasn't the only one," Zina said sharply. "Nolika and Sefa, they were in on this too. They had their own plan. They wanted to teach Lamara a lesson, so they came up with the idea." Her voice cut through the silence like a blade. "They said we should cut off Obasi's manhood. That'll stop him. That'll make him stay home. But they didn't have the courage to do it themselves. I did." The villagers turned their eyes toward Nolika and Sefa, who stood frozen. Nolika, always proud and strong, now looked small and afraid. Sefa's hands trembled as she tried to speak, but the guilt was written all over her face. "It was just talk," Nolika stammered. "We never thought she would actually do it." But the truth was out. Zina's jealousy and misunderstanding had driven her to commit the unthinkable, and Nolika and Sefa's schemes had pushed it forward. The villagers could hardly believe what they were hearing. A mix of jealousy, misunderstanding, and betrayal had led to the destruction of Obasi's household. But the worst was yet to come. Zina looked around, her voice cold again. "And the soup you all ate this morning?" she said slowly. The crowd leaned in. "The meat in that soup, it was Obasi's manhood." A wave of horror swept through the crowd. The women gasped. The men stepped back in disgust. Their stomachs turned as they realized what they had consumed. The once joyous feast had turned into a nightmare. Beyond imagination, Nolika, who had been silent until now, saw her chance and tried to slip away quietly, hoping to escape the villagers' wrath. But before she could disappear, someone grabbed her arm. "Where do you think you're going, Nolika?" a voice called out. The crowd quickly surrounded her. She was forced to face their angry stares. Nolika's face went pale as she realized there was no way out. Trembling, she stammered, I I didn't mean for it to happen this way. It was just a moment of anger. I was so frustrated with Obasi's endless marriages. I only suggested cutting off his manhood out of desperation. I didn't think Zina would actually do it. The crowd erupted in murmurs of disbelief. So it was true? Someone shouted. You planned this? Nolika's eyes darted around, desperate to find someone, anyone who would believe her. It was just talk. We were all angry, but I never wanted it to go this far. I just wanted him to stop chasing women. But the villagers weren't convinced. The damage had already been done. Obasi's life had been destroyed because of Nolika's careless words, Zina's jealousy, and Sefa's silent support. Sefa stood quietly to the side, her face filled with shame and regret. She didn't speak. She knew her silence had helped seal Obasi's fate. The whole village stood stunned by the evil that had taken place in Obasi's home. What started as a plan to get rid of one wife has spiraled into something dark and twisted. The once proud and fiery Nolika was now caught in the very web she had helped spin. The villagers could hardly believe what they had witnessed, a tale of betrayal, jealousy, and blood.